you talk about the hero's journey arc, we might be in the cave, right? Like we might be in the battle, but if we can take the time to find something good that happened and recognize it and recognize our role in it, that meaningfully shifts our perspective so that we're not just looking for our fulfillment when we exit the cave, when we win the battle, when we get the promotion, when we have the money in our bank account, when we see the number on the scale, whatever the thing is that we're trying to achieve. And so it really is about changing our perspective to take in more of what is already here. And for those people who are thinking like, okay, that's a cute idea, right? Like you want me to think of 3 good things, but I am in the mud right now. I offer the reframe to my clients sometimes of, okay, fine. It doesn't have to be 3 quote unquote good things. What about 3 things that made you smile?
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Create Magic at Work. Today's a special day. I actually have a returning guest, my friend and colleague, Becky Morrison. Becky actually helped birth, I don't know if that's the right word, the Create Magic at Work podcast when I started in September of 2020. Becky was one of the first guests on the podcast, and we talked about the art of saying no. How no is a complete sentence and how to do that in uncomfortable spaces. I've asked Becky back to talk a little bit more about happiness. She's the coach, author, and speaker of all things happiness. You can find her at untanglehappiness.com. And let me tell you a little bit more about her today as we all change and shift throughout the months and years. So what do you do when you've achieved your goals, yet you still don't feel happy? Well, even though Rebecca Morrison was a happily married mom and lawyer with a 2-decade career in big law and finance, she felt something was missing. That feeling led her on a quest to figure out whether it was possible to be both successful and happy. Now a happiness coach and author of The Happiness Recipe, a powerful guide to living what matters, Rebecca helps successful but unsatisfied high achievers find their happiness recipe so they can live happier, lead happier, and build happy businesses. Rebecca is a graduate of Wellesley College and Georgetown Law. She's also a UC Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute certified executive coach and a certified applied positive psychology practitioner. Becky, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so fun to be back, and it's been so fun to watch as this podcast and your work has evolved and grown. So thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. It's been quite a journey. I'm like, how has this been over, like 2.5 years since we talked about the art of saying no? And of course, we talk all the time as friends. Wow, what happened to the time?
Right, I know.
So I wanted to talk to you a little more. I've been diving into this concept of happiness, and I envision a lot of the Create Magic at Work community and the listeners, getting up to start their day, their work day, just sometimes even just trying to get through the day. And then all of a sudden feeling this yearning that maybe they're not living a happy life, or maybe there's something more, this yearning that there's something more out there, but they don't really know what to do about it. And there's sort of this internal agitation or dissatisfaction about where they are. Well, someday I'll be happy. And when I get this, then I will be. And if this workload decreases, then I can do this. If and when, then. So let's start off there. What would you say to all of us? I mean, we all do it, right? That are sitting in that space.
So first, the first thing I would say is that you are not alone, right? Like that you've actually described the typical sort of way that people find me in the work that I do, which is I checked the boxes and I thought that the end of the sentence, like you said, if I check this box, then I will be happy. And the happiness didn't follow. And so I'm confused. Like, why is this not working the way I expected? And so the first thing is, I think it's a little bit of a reframe of how we think about happiness. And I won't bore you with like a long history of the concept of happiness, but I do want to point out that sort of over the course of history, happiness has been treated like this thing that is only judged when we are at the end. And it's this thing that's sort of like, I think you used the word earlier when we were talking offline, this like carrot that's dangled out there as the reason to do the hard work, the reason to show up is you will earn the happiness. But the reality, and the social science and the positive psychology space is proving this more and more, is that happiness is about how we show up on the journey and not about our destination or about our circumstances. So kind of the most powerful statistic in that space that's come out of the research that I like to point out to people is when we think about our sources of happiness, like what makes us happy. About 50% of our happiness is determined by our natural set point, which is sort of kind of how we come wired to the world. Then there's a remaining 50%. 40% let me go the other way. 10% of the rest are circumstances. So all of those things that we think will earn us happiness only really account for about 10% of our happiness. The remaining 40% of the pie comes from the way we are showing up, meaning our thoughts, our actions, our everyday behaviors will determine how we are experiencing life and whether we're really happy while we're doing it. And so that's a huge mindset shift for a lot of people because we've been taught, and it's been historically true, that we look at happiness as this sort of thing that we will arrive at versus this thing that we can have and need to work to have or be intentional about having along the way.
You have me thinking of, I'm wondering if this is our wiring. Well, I guess it would be like it's nature versus nurture, right? So like it would be the environmental piece that our society has, in the US at least, and possibly in other cultures and countries around the world, a lot of the movies we watch have the happy ending.
The happy ending, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of the fairy tales that I read as a little girl had the happy ending. It was like this journey, and then the end of the story was when the person walked off happy. And then I'm also like, okay, so there's a script to that pulls and tugs at like the human soul, the hero's journey, where they answer a call, they go on this journey, they go through tribulations, they meet people along the way, they maybe meet a Yoda, their guide, like us, the coaches or the heroes who are our clients. And then our expectation is, I think, programmed that at the end of that is where the happiness is, the end of that journey. When I study it, it's more like a completion of a journey, and then you can restart and answer another call. So how do we reprogram that wiring? How can we sit here today like, gosh, if I just had that contract or this extra bonus at work, then I would finally be happy because I'll pay this debt off. But I'm going to be stressed out about it every day until that happens.
Yeah.
What can we do in the moment to shift from that a little bit?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I mean, the first is recognizing, I think what happens is when we are trained to be sort of an achievement-based society, meaning we're always looking at where we're trying to go. And in looking at where we're trying to go, we often ignore where we are. And so that's a really complicated way of saying we are future looking instead of being in the present. So actually, I think part of the solution, or the first part of the solution, is changing your perspective a little bit to look at not only where you want to go and what you want to achieve, but what do you already have? And so that's simple practices like gratitude. Or there's another exercise that, again, comes out of the science and positive psychology that's got some really interesting research behind it that says if we take the time every day to identify 3 good things that happen and our role in them happening, we can see powerful benefits in how we're feeling about our life, even if we're in a difficult time or in a difficult headspace. You might be, like you talk about the hero's journey arc, we might be in the cave, right? Like we might be in the battle. But if we can take the time to find something good that happened and recognize it and recognize our role in it, that meaningfully shifts our perspective so that we're not just looking for our fulfillment when we exit the cave, when we win the battle, when we get the promotion, when we have the money in our bank account, when we see the number on the scale, whatever the thing is that we're trying to achieve.
Mm.
And so it really is about changing our perspective to take in more of what is already here. And for those people who are thinking like, okay, that's a cute idea, right? Like you want me to think of 3 good things, but I am in the mud right now. I offer the reframe to my clients sometimes of, okay, fine. It doesn't have to be 3 quote unquote good things. What about 3 things that made you smile? Anything that made you smile today, anything that made you feel at peace today. Those are good things. And I think we can lose sight of those when we are looking at kind of a lot of work to do, or we're feeling a lot of threat around us. It's not feeling great. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I want to take us back to something that we need to go back to.
Okay.
And that is, I talked about the hero's journey. We talked about stories, movies, scripts that we love. The start of the story, the journey, the struggle, the breakthrough, the completion. However, we've been wired to possibly think of the happily ever after. What if I'm sitting here, or a member of the Create Magic at Work community listening is like, I don't even know what the call is. It started off saying, oh, it's the hero's journey. You answer the call. Well, and we talk so much in the workplace and on LinkedIn about find your why and what's your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Often, I don't know if there is help to those that may not know what their call is, or may not even think they have a call, or may not even want a call or a calling or a life purpose. Like, where do we start with that?
Yeah. That's a really interesting one. And I will say that the work that I did in getting my my applied positive psychology certification, there is a piece I learned in there that revolutionized this concept for me. And it's the following. And so I'm going to give you some definitions. So when we talk about purpose, like you're talking about, like call or mission, I think of that as capital P purpose, like maybe even all caps, right? Purpose in neon flashing letters. And it's really like why you're here on the earth at this time. What is it that you uniquely can give to the world? And I think for a lot of us, that doesn't get discovered or uncovered until we're further along in our lives. Then there are a couple other concepts. And the first one I want to talk about is little p purpose. Oh, and the last thing I'll say about that big neon purpose is that is not something we ever complete, right? So for me, if my big P purpose is to spread joy, I'm never going to finish that. That's not going to be done before I die.
I love that.
But then we've got little P. Yeah. So then we've got little P purpose, and little P purpose as like sort of big undertakings that are very meaningful. They might contribute to the world, but they're not kind of like the only reason we're here on the earth at this time. So I'll give you an example of that in my life. Building a coaching business was a little P purpose for me. Raising my kids is a little P purpose for me, right? Having a successful marriage is a little P purpose for me. So these are all things that have like important meaning in my life, things that I might determine how I live my life and how I make my decisions, but they will finish potentially in my lifetime, right? And the last is meaning. And this is where my mind shifted in a huge way when I was doing this learning. What I learned is that in order to have a thriving life, in order to live happy, we don't actually need to know our capital P purpose, but we do need to have meaning in our everyday lives. And that was I was like, wow, what a big unlock, because sometimes not having this calling or not knowing what the capital P purpose is can be really disorienting, and trying to find it can be really anxiety provoking. It can actually detract from our happiness. And so it's a real release to be able to say, don't worry about it, set it down and focus on connecting every day to something that has meaning for you.
Yeah, that's so good, because I can see, like, I've been in some workspaces where including, I mean, I'm sure I did this at some point in my leadership career, like, find your why, like, what's your why for being here? And it's just so, like, I could totally see how that would be anxiety producing for someone that's like, I have no idea. Like, I am just here today to like do this job and go home. Or whatever it means, right? Or whatever that means. So in SQ, one of the skills is what is your level of your awareness of your life purpose? And I could see how that could bring up, like, oh my gosh, what's my level of my awareness of life purpose? But one of the biggest things that we talk about that is very in line with what you're saying is the daily meaning. How do I tap into having meaning each day in my life? And then how does that get me one step closer to understand my reason for being, or the personal contribution that I'm here to give to the world?
Yeah.
Long term. And I love how you described there's no end game. Like, it's just like, if I'm here to spread joy, that's never going to end. If I'm here to do work for the greater good, that's not
ending.
And it might not have the same name. It might not have the same title. It might not be dressed in the way that you think it's supposed to look. But if that's the neon P, yeah, purpose. That sounded really gross.
Well, you'll remember it.
Back up.
That's awesome.
That's not living purpose.
Yep.
Then that is actually so calming.
Yeah. Because there's no rush then, right? Like there's no and I think again, because we're this achievement-based society, there's no end. Like there's no checking all the boxes on that purpose, on like what your life purpose is. You'll be doing it forever or forever. And I think, it's interesting you brought up this concept of like, find your why. To me, this like restructuring of purpose and meaning, or this new understanding of it, is really just expanding what the possible whys can be, right? So when you talk about a why in the workplace, I don't think it's a bad concept, but you have to leave room for that. One person's why might be something like doing good work to help the world, and another person's why might be, I need to pay my medical bills. And both of those whys are equally valid, equally important, and equally fueling our thriving. But I think it's being allowed to recognize what our very real meaning or why of showing up to do whatever it is that we're doing is. Like, am I here to connect with people? Am I here because I care about doing good work? Am I here because I need to earn a paycheck? Am I here because I made a commitment and I want to fulfill it? All of those are meaningful. They may or may not be tied to a bigger P purpose, and that's okay.
Yeah. So if we're examining our daily behaviors and decisions to see if our actions are leading us in the direction of maybe personal fulfillment or a bigger purpose, how can we discern when we are moving off track, and how do we get back on track?
So I think the first thing is looking across sort of your daily actions and decisions and evaluating whether those things have meaning to you. And that sounds kind of simple, but it's like, am I doing things to do them? Am I doing things because I've been told I should do them? Or am I doing things because I have a personal connection to them? Like I said, maybe that connection is doing good work or getting a paycheck or whatever it is. That's fine. But do I have kind of a meaning behind my actions and decisions? And I think the first indicator that we're out of alignment or off track is when fewer and fewer of our decisions have a personal meaning to us, and we're really doing them because we're being told to, because we feel like we have to, because we the shoulds. That's a great indicator. And so I think, and I have found in my own life, this was my experience, and certainly I've observed it with clients that I've worked with, the more and more that we align our daily actions with meaning, the more and more we begin to see patterns that might lead us to one of the purposes, either a little P purpose or that big neon flashing purpose. I think it is about, it all comes down to alignment, and sort of being aligned in doing things that have meaning to you will kind of ultimately and naturally help you uncover your purpose.
Can you give us some real world or like real specific examples of what action in alignment with meaning mean or are? Like, what are some examples?
Yeah, I can. I need just a second. So I'm thinking of one client in particular who I'm going to try and anonymize this as much as possible. And actually, it's kind of true for a number of clients. But so picture this. You're a leader at a very high level in a company that maybe doesn't serve the world in a real humanitarianly obvious way. So like pick any really capitalist function, right? Like you're a bank. Now we can argue like banks make money available to help the economy grow, which serves everyone. I mean, we could like make that argument, but let's say like I work at, and none of my clients work at Citibank, so I'll use Citibank. I work at Citibank, and what I do is I invest money for wealthy people and I help them get richer. It could be really easy to be like, wait, why am I here? So what does it look like to begin to align your daily actions with your purpose? Well, or with your meaning rather. Well, so let's say you're this busy executive and what you've been doing is just like kind of on this hamster wheel, going, filling all your time. You're overcommitted. You're not delegating enough. You're not spending time, kind of balance. I don't want to say balance. I hate the word work-life balance, but balancing out your life. Like you're not spending time committed to things outside of work and you are unhappy and you're feeling it. And as you're sort of reflecting on this, you realize, hey, one of the things I could do that would have a lot of meaning for me would be to develop the people around me. So I want to do a better job of delegation. That's a great example of a daily action that could have some meaning, right? And so now I'm not just delegating because I want more time for myself. I'm delegating because developing people is important to me. Okay, so you do that and you do it successfully for a handful of months. And then you realize this has created some space in my life. I'm not as busy as I used to be because I've developed the people around me. I've got a team supporting me. And so you're able to think about, well, what do I want to do with that space? And what you realize is that there's an organization that you've been donating money to that you've never had time to really work with because you've been so busy at work. And now you go and work with them. And in that work, you find that you're doing the same thing. You're really focused on developing people in that organization, helping people get back on their feet and find a job or whatever the organization does, right? And then it starts to become clear, oh, wait, there's a theme here. I really am driven to help people get better. I might be approaching that neon sign purpose. And I've oversimplified it, but that's kind of a little bit of a more concrete example of how that unfolding might happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was a beautiful story. Yeah. And I think that, we talk a lot about workplace scenarios. It's also important to note that if you feel a call to have a nurturing home environment or really, like I have a couple of clients that I've talked to that really have pivoted to like, no, like my legacy's here in the home.
Yes.
And this is just in this season of my life. That's really important work also, because that's creating this ripple effect out into the community. It comes all from inside our homes really too. So that's legacy also. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. That was a really, really great way to share how we can take action towards meaning. Because I think a lot of these words are kicked around in the workplace and people like don't even really know where to start or how to start. So if somebody is like, I don't even care about this, I just want to be happy. And I think that if I get XYZ, I will be. And I'm just waiting for that day. Let's go back to that. How can they start changing that 50% of the wiring that's going on within them to live a more satisfied and fulfilled present moment?
Yeah. And so I'll just reframe it a little bit because I think we're not changing. We typically aren't. There are things in life that can change our wiring, but I think actually what we're trying to influence is that 40% of like thoughts and actions, right?
Okay.
And so your question is like, I'm here, I'm feeling unhappy, like I don't know where to start.
Yeah,
Fair, I get it. I'm a huge inventory person. I've always been a huge inventory person, meaning one of the things that I like to do in the context of a coaching container in particular is to invite the person I'm working with to really because I think about this all like a puzzle, right? And I want to let's put all the puzzle pieces on the table. And then let's start to sort them. So how could you do that on your own? Well, spoiler alert, you can find my book. And I've got a chapter in there. And that's one of the early things I ask you to do is really begin to take an inventory of what's in your life so that you can start to identify what's feeding your happiness and what's causing friction. And then you can think about which you want to address, because there's two ways to address your lack of happiness. One is to decrease the friction and the other is to increase the things that are happy. And so you just figure out your plan of attack. But in the context of a session, we sit down and we look and like, okay, what's all the things? What are all the things that are feeding our energy and draining it? And what do we want to do with that? And so I think that's a beautiful way to start. And if you're overwhelmed thinking about your whole life, you can do it in small pieces. You can do it in containers. What's working in this relationship and what's not working? what's working in this space, and like work or home or friendships or whatever, what's not working. You don't have to bite it all off at once. But I think it can be helpful to look at the whole picture and figure out which, where the drain is and where the energy is coming from.
Isn't it safe to say that there always be a drain and a energy injection?
Yes, please, and thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think we haven't said it explicitly, but I think it's important, and I try to say it all the time. Like when I talk about myself as a happiness coach, it's a little bit inaccurate, right? Because the reality is there is no world in which happiness or happy feelings are the only things. We absolutely live in a world where we will face challenges, and there will be things that take our energy and there will be things that give us energy. But it's about doing what we can to manage that balance sheet. And some of it we can control and some of it we cannot control. But let's use, instead of just coasting through life towards a destination, hoping that when we get there, we'll still have gas in the tank. Let's actually spend the time thinking about where can we control the drain? Where can we control the injection? And let's actually exercise that control.
I have another question before we get to the journal prompts.
Yes.
I want to talk about the Gen Z workforce that's into the workforce right now. I have found personally that this is one of their, I don't want to call it I guess I'm going to call it, this is one of their biggest struggles, is figuring out what they really want. Because a lot of, and we did it too, right? I'm a Gen Xer, but a lot of us are just doing what we think we should be doing or what we're told we should be doing. My mom told me to get a degree in engineering. Now my dad says to do this. And then it's like, well, what do you want to do? And they have a blank stare when you ask them that. They literally can't answer it at times. What would you say to someone that is looking to tap into their own inner answers that feels like, my gosh, I'm asked that question and I'm just like, I don't know, because I just have done what everybody has told me.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we're talking about, as we go on in generations, like younger and younger, we're talking about people who've had way more noise around the shoulds than even we did, right? Like we had a lot of noise around the shoulds because we had our peers and our schools and our parents telling us what we need to do, and maybe some like media in the form mostly of, like movies, TV shows, and advertising. But now you've introduced social media, which is a constant barrage of this is how it should look. This is what you should want. This is what you should do to get it. And so they really haven't been given the space and opportunity, kind of by unless they've really been forced to take it, to connect with themselves. So for me, I mean, the beginning is, do you have a connection with your inner voice? If you do not have a connection with your inner voice, then the first thing we need to do is build that connection with this is like a detachment from outcome way of doing it, with no particular answer that we're looking for. I just want to know what it says. What does your inner voice say about what you're having for lunch? What does your inner voice say about what it wants to do today? What does your inner voice say about what would make it happy in this moment? What does your inner voice say would be really fun? I mean, like just any wide-ranging exploration to connect with that voice, because the more that you connect with it, the more that you listen to it, the louder it will get. And then you can begin to ask it the hard questions. But I think going right to the hard question, you're not going to get an answer because that's a voice you haven't connected with, a conversation you haven't developed, and trust that's not there.
So good. Like weightlifting, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Practice. And it's building a muscle, and it's a muscle that you haven't built. And it's not your fault you haven't built it. It is the world's fault you haven't built it. And so that doesn't mean you can't build it now. It's never, ever, ever, ever too late.
Never too late. Yeah. Thanks for offering that up for everyone. I mean, even like for us, we still need to do that, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pull a journal prompt card from my journal prompt card deck. It's a deck of 33 cards for your career and your work. And you can find it at createmagicatwork.net. This one keeps coming out. It's teamwork. So the affirmation is, I now attract positive people into my life who serve my highest good. I now attract positive people into my life who serve my highest good. For teamwork. Becky, what do you think a peaceful workplace should look like?
It's so interesting. When you asked that question, I just felt it in my body. And so it's like, now I have to put into words what would be required to get that feeling. But I think a peaceful workplace is one where can be and can bring your whole self if you choose to. It is a workplace where it is safe to make mistakes, where perfection is not expected, and where you don't have to be on high alert with everything that you do out of fear. Now, that is different, to be clear, than having high standards. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't work hard. I'm not suggesting that a workplace where you are expected to do good work is a bad thing, but there has to be safety in the normal human stumbles. A peaceful workplace is one where people have moments of high quality connection with each other, even if they're not best friends, right? Like, it's not necessarily about liking each other, but it's about, can we connect and respect each other as humans? And do we demonstrate empathy both in the tough times and in the good times? A peaceful workplace, and this is, maybe I could go on forever about this, so maybe this will be my last one, but a peaceful workplace is one where achievements, big and small, are recognized and celebrated.
Very good. Thank you for painting that picture and for putting that out for everyone listening. Becky, if people want to get in touch with you, connect with you, read your book, The Happiness Recipe, how can they do all that?
So one-stop shop, you said it earlier in the episode, untanglehappiness.com. Everything is there, including ways to connect with me on social or book time on my calendar.
Yay. Becky, thank you so much for being a returning guest on the Create Magic at Work podcast. And thank you for sending some magic to everyone today.
Thank you, Amy, for creating this space.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.